Dear viewers, welcome to Sightline. This is a program where we discuss important events with important people. In December, we observe International Migrants Day, and our guest for today has a vast successful experience in policy development areas on migration issues. His name is Victor Lutenco, and he's a project manager at International Organization for Migration of the United Nations. Thank you, Mr. Lutenco, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start our conversation by giving our audience a little bit background information about your organization. What is International Organization for Migration and what projects is it implementing in Mongolia?
Well, IOM is, I guess, it's pretty old in terms of UN system. We were founded back in 1951, and our initial idea was to help with all the resettlements that happened in Europe, mostly after the World War II. But during the time, the mandate changed a lot, exactly or in parallel with how migration changed in the world. So migration became more like a global phenomenon, and IOM expanded and worked increasingly on protecting migrants' rights, on working more on migration policies, and helping the governments actually deal with migration first, as migration is a problem, migration is a crisis, but then little by little transitioning towards helping the government harvest the positive aspects of migration, the developmental impact of migration. And I think that's exactly what we are trying to do now in the world, and also that's the focus of our programs also in Mongolia. Because of the specific situation in Mongolia and because of the fact that the word migration in this country is most associated not so much with international flows, but mostly with internal flows, then internal migration is one of the key priorities for the government, for the Ulaanbaatar administration, and also for us.
Very interesting. I think I read it from one of your reports that internal migration in Mongolia is not caused by climate change. Rural residents moving from countryside to the Ulaanbaatar city are looking for better educational, employment, and economic opportunities. What would you comment on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and that's a point of view that I support as often as I can. Of course, you see, definitely the climate change, the specific situation in Mongolia, the dzoods, right? They do have an impact on people and on the livelihoods of the people.
Yeah, that's right.
And when the livelihoods depend so much on the herds, on the agriculture, of course, the climatic change and dzoods, when people are losing like everything that they had. Of course, these can work as a pushing factor for migration, but it would not be correct to say that migration is caused just by climate change or just by dzood. What dzood is doing is just making some of the causes even more profound or more just aggravating what is already pushing people for migrating. And also, it is the biggest problem with saying that the climate change is responsible for migration is because it orients the policy thinking towards solving the climate change and not to solving the real problems of migration. So if we say that climate change is causing migration in Mongolia, then that would mean if we solve climate change, if we solve the climate problem, then we solve the migration problem. But it's not true. But there are also factors that we call pull factors, things that attract, right? And we have to remember that Ulaanbaatar is one of the so-called primate cities. It is like many times bigger than the second city in the country. So Ulaanbaatar is like about 13 times bigger than Edirne, right?
Yes.
In Asia, a bigger primate city is only Bangkok in Thailand, which is 30 times bigger than the second city in Thailand. And just because of these, it is a natural attraction point, because you have everything concentrated in Ulaanbaatar. So people are also attracted by just the urban style of living, by the proximity of the school, of the hospital, of the services, of being able to go to a shop, of being in the middle of a very vibrant life, a very high-speed life, and so on. So I wouldn't say that in order to find a more moderate speed of migration, we have to orient ourselves just at the push factors, but we also have to look at the pull factors. To look at migration not just as a crisis that comes after a dzud or that comes after a conflict, what happens in other countries, but to look at migration as a normal way of life, as a normal process, and to look at migration as something that has to be managed, that has to be ordinated, right? And migration brings most of the positive consequences and least negative consequences when it's orderly, when it's humane.
What is it like to work on policies helping somewhat disoriented, vulnerable people who also have great potential for economic development?
In a word, it's exciting. It's actually very exciting to work and to help bring those people from the fringes, which are sometimes even actual fringes in Ulaanbaatar, right? This is where we find migrants very often. And even the phraseological fringes of the society, to bring them into the center of the development dialogue, of the development narrative. So let me give you two examples so that you understand why those people are actually probably one of the greatest wealth of Mongolia. Let's start from international migration. Did you know that the Mongolians abroad, those who are residing now abroad, there are about 130,000 of them. They're sending back to Mongolia with their remittances, like the money that they're sending to their families.
Family members, yeah.
So the money that the Mongolia is making from or is receiving from their citizens abroad are actually the same or even a little bit bigger than what Mongolia is making out of selling its gold abroad.
Oh, really?
So this is $500 million, a little bit more than $500 million per year that Mongolia is receiving in terms of remittances.
That's a great amount.
This is a lot of money, and these are money which are contributing to the development of the economy. If the attention of the government, but also of the NGOs, of the international organizations, are oriented towards how can we motivate people who are sending those money to think not only about consumption, but also about investments, but also about starting new businesses.
Yeah, that's right.
But also about orienting those money into production and then stimulating exports, then we'll have even more benefits out of that. And that's exactly what I mean when I'm saying managing migration and orienting it from, let's say, a neutral or a negative perception into a positive one. Going to the internal migration, people are moving to Ulaanbaatar not because they want to make bad air or because they want to cause traffic jam. They're moving to Ulaanbaatar because they want a better life for themselves and for their family, like everybody else.
Yes, that's
And
right.
we have to recognize that and start from here. Do these people who are coming to Ulaanbaatar, do they want to work? Yes, they do. Are they open to learn new professions? Are they open to, adapt to the requirements of the city? Of course they do. But they need to be helped. And migration is never an easy decision. It's not an easy decision for anyone to leave the place where you were born, especially in Mongolia, when the connection between the people and the nature is so strong. But it's also part of the Mongolian, heritage even, to be mobile, right? So I think what we're trying to work with the government with is to find and to show like the strong parts of migrants. These are the people who accumulated some money. They made this very difficult decision, a decision which, by the way, is usually made by the woman in the household.
Really?
Because a migration decision is a complex decision. It's not just about,
I agree with you.
about having a new job. It's about the kids, it's about the new households, it's about
Exactly.
renting, it's about making decision about the family budget, it's about planning. You cannot
Exactly.
migrate just, for next spring or next winter. That's an important decision that marks your life. And it looks like, for the Mongolian households, women take the lead in taking this decision, and this is what our researchers are showing us. So you have to be really strong, and you have to really be a very courageous person or household to make a decision to migrate. So when we talk about migrants, it's true that very often the society and the situation is pushing them towards being vulnerable. But they are not vulnerable as such. They're actually strong people. And it's a great potential out there that, in our opinion, have to be used to support the entire society and also their family. They just need to be led a little bit.
What are the impacts of internal migration in Mongolia on status of women in Mongolia?
The way women and children are affected is specifically when we look at the profile of the internal migrants. And what we found out is that the families, or let's say the people who migrate or who tend to migrate more often, are young families with age in between 25 and 40. This is like the core. But not just young families, but young families with small children. And with small children aged from 0 to 4. So it looks like these families did think about migrating, but it was with the child being born that the final push was made towards leaving the place and moving to Ulaanbaatar.
Interesting.
And of course, when you change your place of living, when you're not necessarily, can afford everything that the trip involves, all the changes, in the livelihood, in having a place, having an educational institution, everything, then of course it affects children directly. And it affects children also, and we see this situation in Ulaanbaatar because, unfortunately, there are many more children who would like to go to a kindergarten than the available places in the kindergarten. And the same situation is with schools. And we have an over-concentration of children in the school auditoriums or in kindergartens, which is negatively affecting also the quality of education that is happening. So, of course, migration has a direct consequence on the quality of services that children have. It also puts an additional pressure. Because of that, it puts an additional pressure on women to actually stay home and take care of those children who cannot go to the kindergarten. And because of that, of course, the situation of women is getting worse because there is an imbalance with the revenues in the family. Who is bringing home the money? And usually, who is bringing home the money, that person is leading the family or is, let's say, telling what to do, right?
Yes.
So because of this economical imbalance and because of the fact that, taking care of children is still not considered as a work, right? It's more like a duty, like a natural duty.
In many countries, yeah.
And because of that, of course, you could say that migration is affecting very much the situation of women and children. But again, in this case, I think migration wouldn't be correct to call migration a cause. The cause is not really the migration, but the cause is the lack of proper infrastructure to adapt to these migration flows.
As a media, what do you think we should do to help to better manage migration issues in Mongolia?
I think you should do what you do the best. You should ask hard questions, ask hard questions to everyone, Those in the government, international organizations, NGOs, ask questions on the people on the street, and as much as possible focus on the issue, but also narrow down to the problems, trying to find the core, trying to find the causes, and pushing people towards thinking about solutions and about sustainability of those solutions.
That's right. I agree with you, Mr. Lutenco. So we are starting a new decade. And what's your plan for January? And what's your long-term plan in Mongolia?
Well, actually, January is going to be a busy month for us.
Okay.
We're going to OOBS. We are working with the administration, but also with the civil society there, planning an information campaign for the prospective migrants. Our approach in building information campaigns is we actually go to the people and we talk with them. We involve them in planning and developing that information campaign. We're using the so-called communication for development approach. So we will be working OOBS in order to plan for that campaign, but the campaign will have an impact and will be aired, let's say, in entire Mongolia. We're going to OOBS because our research also showed that OOBS is one of those 3 IMAGs with the biggest concentration of potential migrants. And also one of those IMAGs from which we saw the biggest migration flows, internal migration flows. The rest of the year, we'll basically have 3 main important directions. The first one, helping the government have good data. Statistical information, snapshots of the situation in Ulaanbaatar specifically, the migration situations, how many people, where, what's the level of vulnerability, and things like that. We will also help the government with more research, because having figures is one thing. Understanding why this is happening, understanding what are the policy implications, that requires more work. So I'll be working with National University of Mongolia, Swiss universities, universities in Holland, our colleagues in the regional office in Bangkok, and the rest of the world basically, focusing all this knowledge and making that knowledge and experience work for Mongolians, for Mongolian government and for Mongolian people.
That's very exciting.
And the third dimension is we'll focus on delivering actual services to people, to migrants, both informational services but also direct social services, helping the government and NGOs provide better assistance to migrants so that they, again, as we started this discussion, moving them from the fringes of the society to the center of development.
Mr. Lutenco, pleasure to have you, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Today we had Mr. Victor Lutenco. He's a program manager at the International Organization for Migration of the United Nations. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.